Hey everyone, welcome back to this module on project-based learning. You have just gotten exposed to project-oriented learning versus project-based learning, and you are more than ready to start the planning process for your first project. So you've reached this really important milestone, and I hope this is really fun and engaging for you. And by the end of this course, you should have your first project ready to go out the gates to implement with students. So without further ado, let's get into the planning portion of your first project. And the first question we have to answer is, how do you establish the idea for a project? Where do project ideas come from? Because they come from multiple places, and we're going to look at what some of those places are. Now, our objectives are to first discover the starting point for projects. So where do project ideas come from? Where are they born? Are you singing somehow in the shower in the morning and bam, an idea pops in your head? Possibly, but we're going to look at a more methodical way of coming up with the idea for projects. We're going to brainstorm some possible project ideas once we have kind of some topics that we have in mind. And then third, determine really the answers to the two most important questions. What will students do and what will they create? Okay, because this is very action oriented, as we learned from project-based learning. So let's get into what you will need. This is going to be a very creative process. So as such, you should have the most creative utensils possible, which of course are sticky notes. So as you see to the right, you see those sticky notes. Those are going to be very helpful in you just coming up with tons of ideas. Your curriculum documents will also help. So I'm assuming that you have a curriculum of some sort, whether you're a teacher, whether you lead an after-school program, or whether you're a parent, a homeschool parent. I'm sure there's some sort of curriculum. So please have that handy. Have a blank piece of paper, and I'm going to share why you're going to need that blank piece of paper in a second. And finally, your PBL workbook, page 12 and page 13. So I'm going to take you over there in a second here to pages 12 and 13 and explain how we're going to get started with coming up with a project idea. So where do good project ideas come from? Okay, good project ideas, as we mentioned before, come from three sources. Okay, the three sources we usually get for really good project ideas are real-world problems, things that you or your students are passionate about, that you hear them talking about, that they do after school, things like Minecraft, because these kids are playing Minecraft all the time, developing little fidget toys because they love to use these fidget toys, things that are popular or fad, and then curriculum. Good projects also touch on curriculum. And the question for us is, where do we start? Do we start with a real world problem? Do we start with passion, or do we start with curriculum? And my answer to that question is, it doesn't exactly matter where the starting point is, as long as it's covering each of these different realms. It addresses some kind of real problem or challenge. It's something students and teachers are passionate about. And then it also hits the curriculum. That, folks, is the sweet spot. That's the part marked in red. Okay, but to get to that sweet spot, it's very hard to start thinking of that sweet spot right off the bat. So we're going to layer this and first just come up with tons of topics and tons of ideas. So I'm going to guide you through the first part of this process and then give you time to do this yourself. So I'm going to exit out of this because we're going to look at page 12 of our workbook. Okay, so on page 12 of your workbook, it looks something like this. Okay, selecting your first project and selecting the topics. You're going to see a space here for real-world topics, student and teacher passions, and also curricular topics. That's really where we're going to start. Okay, we're not going to try to get too sophisticated. Now, there's two ways you could do this. You could do this in the workbook. However, if you're like me, I love to just spread out and really get those creative juices flowing. I like to stand up, and you might want to write on a piece of paper, just write these three circles, get some sticky notes out, and just start plugging away at coming up with different topical ideas. Okay, but I'm going to give you an example to start out with. Okay, let's say I'm starting my brainstorm session. I'm thinking of real world topics just in my immediate area, and I think street repair is a big real world topic for sure. There's lots of streets and infrastructure locally that really need a lot of help. With that said, another real topic in my particular city I live in is the new stadium proposition. There's a proposition to build a new stadium for soccer, and they're going to call it Soccer City. And I know there's a lot of arguments on both sides of this. So those might be some of those real world topics. I also live near the ocean, so I might say the preservation of our coral reef, because that is something that's definitely on the minds of students and teachers, because it's something that we've been talking about in quite detail. Student-teacher passions. I think for myself, I'm a musician. I might put producing music. I love to produce music. I might think about some of my students' passion. Again, they're really into this game, Minecraft. I know some of the passages, YouTube, creating YouTube tutorial videos. They love doing that. Okay, so I'm just going to start listing those things. Now, curricular topics, this is where you should have your curriculum out. Have that curriculum out in front of you so that you can start to really highlight what are those big topical ideas in your curriculum. So for example, I've taught middle school history, and if I think back to my middle school history experience, I think, okay, I got to teach ancient civilizations. I got to teach local and global geography. I have to teach about the Reformation. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm just simply listing as many topics as I can in real world topics, student teacher passion, and ancient civilization. Curricular topics. Okay, so I'm going to go back now to this and ask that you take the next 5 to 10 minutes and just brainstorm and get as many topics as you can come up with that fit into each of these particular circles. And then after we do that, I'm going to take you to the next step. So please pause this video now and take the time to start that brainstorm. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you're not just continuing this video on, that you've took that 5 to 10 minutes. If you've done this correctly, you will have several topics in each of these circles here for real world problems, passion, and curriculum. And now we're going to move on to our next step. Okay, and our next step is looking at which topics fit the sweet spot. Okay, so you have several topics that you've brainstormed either for real world problems or challenges, things that you or your students are passionate about, and also some curricular pieces. Now those curricular pieces, if you're doing this as an integrated interdisciplinary experience, those curriculum pieces could be topics that really cross over each of the disciplines. Okay, and that's why I didn't necessarily confine it to a particular subject, because we know that good projects cross all different disciplines. All right, so we're going to look at which topics fit the sweet spot. All right, and then we're going to come up with our 51 project ideas. So let's go over here and look at each of our particular topics, okay, and look at which of these is really going to hit that particular sweet spot, which is very curricular rich, is a student or teacher passion, something that people are passionate about, and what is also a curricular topic. All right, so I'm going to start with my real world topics and think which of these overlap and fit into this particular square, their real world and their curricular topics. I'm going to say local and global geography hits these, but I'm going to realize, you know what, that's not something that students are very passionate about. Now I know I can get them passionate about that, so it's not a deal breaker, but I'm going to want to get things that really fit into this particular circle. Now I'm going to look at some other things. The new stadium proposition. Now this is definitely a real world topic. I think it's something that students and teachers are very passionate about. That would fall in this particular circle right here, okay, the new stadium proposition. But it's not super curricular rich in terms of history that we have to teach. It could definitely be in terms of math, if students are creating a blueprint of what that stadium might look like, if they're looking at analyzing the particular budget and how that affects a city. So that definitely could be a curricular topic if you're doing math. But what we're trying to do is get to this sweet spot right here. Okay, this particular sweet spot represents something that is a real world topic. It's something students and teachers are passionate about, and it's also a curricular topic. Now I'm going to put, just for now, I'm going to put, you know what, the preservation of the coral reef. That is something that I know the students are very interested in. And I'm going to change this actually to preservation of our coastline. There's lots of opportunities to connect to real-world experts about this. It's something students and teachers are passionate about. It's definitely a real-world topic. And you know what? It's also could be very curricular rich because there's a lot of talk about topography and geography, which hits those standards that I'd have to hit without just saying local and global geography. And there's obviously a lot of science that's involved with this as well. It could be very strong and rich in terms of science and history. And of course, there definitely could be some math in terms of numbers. But it's very much going to be a rich topic. So maybe that's going to be a particular topic that I'm going to want to generate a project around. Okay, so I'm going to highlight this. Let's say preservation of our coastline. This is it. This is my my topic that I'm going to try to come up with just thousands of project ideas. Okay, so preservation of our coastline is going to hit it. Now, once you've come up with those one or two projects, those one or two topics that you think are going to hit all three of those areas, now is the time to just get wicked and wild and wacky and creative with as many project ideas as you come up with. The reason I put 51 project ideas is because it's actually been proven. There's folks over at IDEO, which is helps out with creativity and helps come up with creative design. And they're all about design solutions. They say that your first 50 ideas are not the best, and that once you get to that 51st idea, that is the project idea that is going to stick. So I know that seems overwhelming and daunting. How do I come up with 51 project ideas? But I'm telling you, if you give yourself a limit and you just start plugging away and throw in sticky notes out, doesn't matter how wacky or wild. You might talk about preservation of the coastline, and everyone's going to become a different bird and look at the flight of birds and overlook the sea and notice really the effect of the coastline. Or there's going to be a drone project because they're going to create a drone and overlook the San Diego Bay and what has happened to it. I'm just spitballing, and these are just project ideas I'm coming up with off the top of my head, and I've already come up with 2 or 3. So where do you come up with project ideas? Here's some different sources. Friends. I'm sure if you throw this out and you know now your topic is preservation of the coastline, find those friends who know a little bit more about that. Maybe you find some surfers who know a little bit more about that. Maybe you have some friends who work in a lab or a biologist who work at the UCSD or Scripps Center right near the coastline, which is a research center. Experts, that kind of relates as well. What kind of experts might know a little bit more about that? Because guess what? They're probably working on projects as we speak with regards to this particular topic. Internet. There's plenty of places you might type in preservation of the coastline and go to the internet and find lots of information. And finally, yourself. What are kind of some ideas that you might come up with on your own? Now, on that particular sticky note, so for example, I'm going to put on the sticky note sustainability, okay? Because this preservation of the coastline is really related to sustainability. So my idea is, how do we preserve the coastline? And it's related to sustainability. I'm going to come up with as many projects I can related to that. Okay, so I think you get the hang of it. You're going to need your sticky notes, and you're going to need your topic, and you are just going to throw those sticky notes out and try to get to the 51st idea, because that 51st idea that you come up with is going to be a result of a lots of weeding down of the other ideas. All right, so the 51st idea is probably going to be best. So take the time now. Get your sticky notes out. I'm going to start the clock. You're going to have a brainstorm time. I put this as 10 minutes. Okay, so start that clock. If you have a computer, look at the computer. If you have a phone handy, start the stopwatch. Give yourself 10 minutes and come up with as many different projects that you can think of that are related to your topic that you're most interested in. Okay, so set that time, 10 minutes. You're going to pause this video. Ready, set, go. Okay, hopefully you're joining me now and you've got Post-its literally everywhere. I'm hoping that you have Post-its that are just all over either a board or a piece of paper somewhere. Those Post-its should just be massive. Now what I want you to do with those Post-its, okay, what you're going to do with these particular Post-its that you came up with your 51 project ideas, you are going to start to organize and classify those Post-its, okay? So take your Post-it notes, okay? Take all your Post-it notes And I want you to start circling or grouping those together towards which you think are going to be the best project ideas. Which of those particular project ideas that you came up with are the most rigorous, are the most have the most opportunity to be very student-centered, have the most opportunity to connect with experts. So start to organize and classify those Post-its. Okay, so I'm going to give you some time to do that before we move on to this, which is the two most important questions that you're going to have to answer. Because what we're going to need is at least 2 projects and a maximum of 5. I know this is going to be hard for you, but pick out those Post-its that you think are the best project ideas. You need 5, okay? So take the time to pick out those 5 Post-its. If you need to pause this video at this point, you can. Okay, so I'm hoping now that you have your 5 Post-its, you've narrowed down and thrown out the other 46, like any good brainstormer or innovative, creative person would do. They do the same thing in design firms, although there's many people involved with this as well. Okay, here are the questions that you're going to have to answer. The 2 most important questions. Here's the first one. What will students do? And the second question is, what will they create? Remember, these projects are action-based, okay? If we give these projects to students right off the bat, we should be able to inspire them to know that they actually are going to make a difference. So, for example, if we look at the preservation of the coastline, okay, so I'm going to go back to page 13 of my booklet. So I'm going to exit out of this for a second, and I'm going to go to page 13. This is page 12. Notice how preservation of our coastline was a project that I came up with, okay? So what will students do? And so now let's say I've looked a little bit more in depth into this, and I've done some research and figured out, well, what are people doing in terms of preservation of the coastline? And I'm going to say that students will create a GIS maps of the coastline and ecosystem to share with local analysts and the city. So GIS maps of the coastline and ecosystem to share with local analysts and the city in a formal presentation. Okay, so I haven't completely fleshed this out, but let's just say that students are going to use these maps of the coastline and the local ecosystem to share with these local analysts that do this kind of work in the city in a formal presentation. Okay, so and I might say about how to preserve the coastline. All right, now notice how that's 1 sentence long. If it takes 4 to 5 sentences to explain what students will do, it's probably too complicated. Remember, this is about keeping it simple. Keep it to 1 simple statement about what students will do. And then here is where you're going to fill out, well, what will students need to know to be successful? Okay, and I'm going to say for students to be successful, they're going to have to know a little bit about the local geography. They're going to have to know a little bit, actually, probably about pollution, both water and air pollution, because that's probably affecting the coastline. With that, they're probably going to have to know about how to do qualitative and quantitative data collection. They're going to have to know how to do data sampling. They're going to have to know about the local fish and game industry. They're going to have to know a little bit probably about global warming, because that's affecting the coastlines as well. So notice, for them to be successful in this task, what is it that they will need to know? I put all that information there as what do they need to know. And that's my first project. So you're going to take 2 different project ideas and list what will students do, what will they need to know. Project idea 2, what will students do, what will they need to know. Okay? That is going to be your task before we move on to taking that concrete statement about what students will do and starting to develop a project out of it. I hope you've enjoyed this session. I hope you found it very valuable, because it's going to really help us to move on to our next section, which is coming up with our driving question. Okay, so that's just to give you a preview. This is what we're coming up with next. What's the driving question for our project? That's going to be very easy to do once we've done this part. I will see you at our next presentation, how to come up with the driving question. Thanks for your attention, and have a great rest of the day.